I coach boys under 11 team at the moment at College Rifles. I don't think that the number of kids rugby teams in Auckland are particularly high, and they keep dropping off, as you get higher and higher. So, there's always that concern and making sure that you've got to have mums engaged in the game. I know New Zealand Rugby is trying to get there.
Okay, very good. Melody Robinson, former Blackfern and now head of TVNZ. Thanks for being with us, Melody. So we've got to move on a bit. I want to sneak in this one, but I want to get to this email because it's fascinating. Wallace, I have had a raised bed on my burn for 2 years. I call it the friendly garden. Young kids look at the labels and learn where veggies come from. I share herbs and whatever else is growing in it. People can help themselves. It takes a little time, a bit of money, but raises many smiles. The council had said it had to be removed, but thankfully 2 years on, they have not been back to check. So that's...
And that was in Whakamatā.
Yeah. Look, I just think it's a fantastic thing, planting out the berm.
I would happily swerve around that.
You and your... All right, now most of us take our phones everywhere, don't they? Often they're part of our work, a tool as important as a pen. But though we can answer email, write notes and reply to calls, they can be distracting. Social media, texts from friends, etc. The whole world is on your phone, so it's unsurprising it may take our attention. Now, some organisations are looking at banning phones to boost productivity. Bosses are sick and tired of people constantly being on their phones. Retailers, call centres are cracking down overseas, like at Tesco, where workers must leave their phones in their lockers. Cafe staff at the British Library have reportedly had to hand their phones over to managers. So, round the panel, would you hand your phone over to your manager at the start of a day, Penny Ashton?
No, that's why I'm self-employed. Definitely not. I mean, how would Bernard have received an answer to his proposal if it had not been on his phone? I mean, I can see it. I think it depends what job you've got. It all comes down to that. Like, my husband is often checking Facebook, but he gets his job done. That's the thing. If you don't get your work done, then there's an issue. But if you do,
well, you can check at lunchtime, can't you?
Yeah, well, absolutely. But I think it all depends. Like, if you're in a call centre, I can't see how you can be on social media and answer calls properly. I've had some dealings with some call centre people recently around the subject of broadband, but I'm pretty sure they were paying attention when I was shrieking at them. But it's so annoying. I just think it all depends on the place of work.
It all depends on the place of work. So
I have some quite strong views on this.
Wow.
Go for it.
I know.
I'm moving
and
back.
very, very seriously economic views, which are that globally there has been a significant slowdown in productivity, output per hour worked, since 2007. Every central banker in the world now is trying to work out what the heck has gone on. It seems to be connected to not just the global financial crisis, but the 2007 launch of the iPhone, which was the beginning of the smartphone era.
And that's when I signed up to Facebook too.
Yep. And Facebook really took off with the smartphone. And the smartphone has changed the world in all sorts of ways. We now, if you're a scooterist, which I am, the people to watch out for are not so much the car drivers, it's the pedestrians who are looking at their phones who are not aware of you.
But your rule would apply to all the low wage and the retailers, not the managers. They won't be able to. They won't have to put their phones in the lockers.
Here's an idea. So it is a problem that people are spending too much time on their phones. If that's an issue, the company should provide company phones with all the apps taken off except for the ones they need for their work.
All right, very good.
Also, there's so much, like, your phone banking and stuff like that. Handing that over, you
nice
could be
one,
like,
Penny. Yes, indeed. All right, Penny Ashton and Bernard Hickey, and congratulations to you, Bernard, and to you, Lynn. It's a wonderful thing to have you on the show. Thank you very much. I'm back Monday. See you later. Bye.
Te whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irirangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. On tonight's program, the high rise, high risk that needs a safety net to stop it shedding potentially deadly panels on pedestrians below. It's literally a traffic stopper. We'll have the latest. The City of Angels is jolted back to earth with a 6.4 quake. Do you know your neighbours? Have you checked on them lately? An elderly Auckland man lay dead in his flat for 5 days before he was found. The government unveils its plans for new schools and classrooms, so where are they going? And speaking of school, a group of students cooks up a storm. On the menu, meat and veg and sides of kindness and compassion. You can watch us live on Facebook.
RNZ News at 5. Kia ora, ko Susana Leata with DNA. A lawyer who worked on the country's most expensive leaky building claim is dismayed the high-rise is still having problems 7 years after they were identified. A 40-kilogram panel fell from the 13th storey of the Victopia apartments in central Auckland yesterday, shutting the area off to traffic and creating heavy traffic congestion. More panels have now been found to be loose. The complex was subject to the country's largest leaky building claim, with repairs currently being carried out, believed to be about $40 million. Lawyer Tim Rainey says the loose panels show there are still problems with construction in New Zealand.
What this really highlights is that building is so complicated and dependent upon people doing their jobs properly, from the people who design the building, the people who build it, and the people who inspect it. And there are so many ways that it can go wrong.
Tim Rainey, who provided advice to Victopia apartment owners on their multi-million-dollar leaky building claim. An Auckland pensioner found dead in his flat may have been there for days. Brian McGinty, aged in his 70s, lived in the Haumoru Housing's Lee Bank Court flats in Manurewa. Jordan Bond reports.
A neighbour says they were told by the paramedics who found Mr McGinty's body in June that it was likely he'd been dead for 5 or 6 days. Haumoru Housing is 51% owned by charity the Selwyn Foundation and 49% by the Auckland Council. The Mayor, Phil Goff, has asked for an investigation. Haumoru Housing's CEO, Gabby Clesi, says they're deeply saddened by Mr McGinty's death. They had been working with him so he could live independently and had spoken to him days before his death. Haumoru Housing has over 1,400 senior citizen flats. This is Jordan Bond.
2 Chinese businessmen have been fined almost $3 million for illegally buying Auckland properties. The Overseas Investment Office began investing Zhong Leung Hong and Shirley Kerr after they bought 2 rural properties in Warkworth. Tom Furley reports.
To buy large rural properties, overseas buyers have to apply for permission from the Overseas Investment Office and meet certain requirements. But an investigation launched by the authority in 2016 found the pair hadn't done that when they bought the properties in 2012 and 2014. During the investigation, Mr Hong and Mr Kerr applied for retrospective consent to buy the properties, but the OIO rejected the bid, saying the investment wasn't beneficial enough for New Zealand. The High Court has now ordered them to sell the properties and pay penalties, costs and the gain made on the investment, totalling $2.95 million. This is Tom Furley.
New schools and additional classrooms will be rolled out across the country as the government prepares for an estimated 100,000 extra students over the next 10 years. The Education Minister Chris Hipkins today announced a new primary school will be built in Milldale near Auckland, and 228 classrooms will be added across 42 Auckland schools. The money will come from the $1.2 billion set aside for school property in this year's budget. Mr Hipkins says the funding set aside so far covers off about half of the estimated role growth, and it's not just Auckland that needs attention.
We've got to make sure we're planning for all of the growth and not just in Auckland. So the growth plan has several kind of chapters to it, which get us on top of that across the whole country.
Education Minister Chris Hipkins. A study has been commissioned to examine the mental health needs of Pacific Islanders forced to leave their homes by the climate crisis. Auckland University's Jemima Tiatia Seith from the School of Māori and Pacific Studies has been granted about $600,000 for the 3-year study from the Health Research Council of New Zealand. Dr Tiatia Seith says the study is timely, given a predicted 75 million people in the Asia-Pacific region will be forced to flee by climate change. She says it is an opportune time to prepare the health sector for a possible influx of climate migrants. Dr Tiatia Seith's study will focus on Niue, the Cook Islands and the city of Christchurch. The Auckland Council says a proposed development through ancient Pohutukawa on Auckland's North Shore has divided the community. The development involves a boardwalk through the sacred grove at the northern end of Takapuna Beach, with one option including the structure and the other excluding it. The wahitapu of 19 ancient Pohutukawa was where Māori would prepare bodies for burial and is of great significance to mana whenua. The council says it has consulted with 7 iwi who want the option to block off the grove to the public. But a spokesman, Chris Bird, says many in the community want to see access maintained.
It's quite a polarising topic. There's a large section of the community that do want to see access maintained. So we did put an option on the table which was almost a compromise. So we did, both options, as I say, remove the boardwalk. So the access is removed for the majority of the site, but the second option did retain access to a smaller portion.
Chris Bird says feedback for the proposals close next Friday. It's 5:05. Despite being 10,000 kilometres away from home, the Jaguares are anticipating plenty of passionate and vocal support in their Super Rugby final against the Crusaders in Christchurch tomorrow night. It's the first time for the Buenos Aires-based side has made the final, and the forward, Juan Manuel Leguizamon, says they have a loyal following.
We are everywhere. A lot of Argentinians in New Zealand. Yeah. So it's good to have Argentinian people supporting us far away from our country. So it's great to have them, and we will try to give them a good day too.
Juan Manuel Leguizamon. Pakistan captain Sarfraz Ahmed says his side will be going all out to score 500 plus runs in their near impossible task to qualify for the Cricket World Cup semi-finals when they meet Bangladesh at Lord's tonight. Pakistan are fifth on the table behind New Zealand, who currently hold the fourth and final semi-final berth. Pakistan need to bat first and beat Bangladesh by at least 316 runs to leapfrog the Black Caps on the net run rate and reach the final four. New Zealand rower Mahi Drysdale has been beaten in the single sculls at the Royal Henley Regatta near London. Drysdale, who was attempting to win the event for a seventh time, was beaten by Matt Brigham of Leeds University. The two-time Olympic champion will compete in the eights over the weekend. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, Adija selects the mixtape. The Black Seeds are this week's Friday Night Live act. They're drying off the cows on Country Life, while some dairy cooperatives are selling off. And Duncan McGillivray introduces us to the element plutonium, which gives us an excuse to dedicate our sonic tonic to the songs and sound bites of power on Nights with me, Brian Crump, after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow. For Northland, fine spells, a few showers clearing tomorrow afternoon. Auckland to Waitomo, including Coromandel, Bay of Plenty, Taupo and Taumaranui. Cloudy periods and a few showers tonight, mainly fine tomorrow. Taranaki and Taihape through to Wellington, partly cloudy, a few showers clearing later tomorrow. Snow possible on the Desert Road overnight. Gisborne, Hawke's Bay and Wairarapa, mostly cloudy with scattered showers. Nelson, Bulla, Westland and Fiordland, also northern Marlborough, mainly fine but isolated showers about southern Fiordland. For the remainder of Marlborough and Canterbury, mostly cloudy with showers north of Ashburton, gradually clearing tomorrow, mainly fine elsewhere. For Otago and Southland, partly cloudy, a few light showers mainly about the south coast, fine spells increasing tomorrow. Chatham Islands, showers. You're with RNZ National, it's coming up to 5:08.
Thanks, Susanna. This is Checkpoint and I'm Lisa Owen. There are growing safety concerns tonight after a building inspection showed more potentially deadly panels are coming loose from a problem-plagued apartment building in Auckland's CBD. Yesterday, one concrete panel weighing an estimated 40 kilos blew off the building on the corner of Nelson Street and Victoria Street West, prompting road closures and traffic gridlock. Now it's emerged that the Auckland Council and the owners of the Victopia apartments have known about the problem since 2012. Matthew Tunison has the story.
It's been some 7 years since the leaks and cracks started appearing in the cladding of the Victopia apartment block, and its woes are continuing. Yesterday, a concrete panel measuring 1.2 by 2 metres came crashing down from the 13th floor, and engineers today found many more panels are coming loose. Had the area below not been cordoned off for repair work that was underway, the panel falling 36 metres from above could have killed or injured a pedestrian. Ian Harris from the Victopia Body Corporate explains what's going to happen now.
I wouldn't expect it to be completed until very late this weekend or early on Monday. We've got 2 or 3 teams of people which we're calling in to get the work done. There's 2 cranes that will be in place and a couple of abseil teams working to do the repairs on the side of the building.
Engineers were today hoisted up the side of the building in a crane basket and checked the other panels on the building. About 40 or so red crosses mark panels they suspect are loose and need reinforcement. Teams plan to fix additional wooden panels over the top before securing the exterior with a safety net. Victopia has been the subject of the country's largest ever leaky building claim worth $40 million, and the repairs are still being done. Lawyer Tim Rainey gave advice to apartment owners when they were lodging the claim.
Mostly the issues with the cladding were discovered because there were found to be leaks and weather tightness issues with the building. There were cracks in the joins between the cladding, which was allowing water to get into the structure of the building. And there was also pressure on those panels because of differential movement between the different elements of the building.
A confidential settlement was reached before the case got to trial, and the company that constructed Victopia and other leaky buildings, Brookfield Multiplex, went into voluntary liquidation. Tim Rainey is bewildered that the building is still having problems.
What this really highlights is that building is so complicated and dependent upon people doing their jobs properly, from the people who design the building, the people who build it, and the people who inspect it. And there are so many ways that it can go wrong. I don't know what the cause of this panel failure is, but what it does highlight is that we still have problems with the quality of our construction in New Zealand right down to this day.
Lucy Shah is a former resident who was there during the leaky building saga.
It was many years ago, a piece of cladding fell from the building onto Nelson Street, and that was how they discovered that there are issues with the building and started investigating. And then they came to the conclusion that our building is leaky and needed remedial works.
The incident has caused huge traffic delays in the Auckland CBD. Traffic has been backed up on Nelson Street and either side of the cordons on Victoria Street for much of the day. And Mark Hannon from Auckland Transport says it's going to stay busy.
We are managing the traffic signals, but the traffic is still very busy in the area. And we have 6 bus stops that have had to be closed. We expect it will be busy again this afternoon. It was certainly busy this morning. Friday does tend to be a bit quieter, and the afternoon peak is spread over a longer period, but I would certainly try to avoid that Nelson Street, Victoria Street area if I possibly could.
In Auckland for Checkpoint, call Matthew Tunis and Tēnei.
Well, Jordan Bond is at the scene and joins us via live view. Kia ora, Jordan. How's the traffic looking there?
Kia ora, Lisa. I'm standing on Nelson Street, just in front of the Victopia building, which is the scene of all this. The traffic is actually not as bad as expected. It seems as though people have got the message to either leave their cars home, perhaps take public transport, or they've gotten away from work early. There are reasonably long queues on both Nelson Street, which goes to the northern motorway, and Hobson Street, which goes to the southern and western motorways. Yesterday the chaos was compounded by pouring rain. Today people have got the message and it's more clear, so it's not as wet and not as chaotic.
Hey, I can see for people watching there is a massive, well, it looks like a crane behind you there, Jordan. Is that connected with the remedial work, or is that another site there?
Yes, there are 3 cranes here working on the building. They're fixing the panels to the building. There are 3 of them here with men in buckets. They don't look like they're stopping anytime soon, so maybe working into the night. One of them has just stopped and it has just started raining. But portions of 3 roads are closed here on quite a busy street going into the motorways. What we have closed is Victoria Street West between Hobson and Nelson, Nelson Street between Victoria and Fanshawe, and the eastbound lane of Victoria into Nelson Street.
So yeah, to put it in context, as you say, it's quite a busy little section of the city there. You've got, Sky Tower not far, and seems to be a pretty important route for the buses as well.
Yeah, there are a number of bus changes over the weekend. Auckland Transport have notified people on their website of that, and there are busy sections going into the main motorway section of Auckland. The Mayor says these panels need to be fixed as soon as possible. This is an issue of public safety. Obviously, it's causing issues for commuters as well. It doesn't look like it's going to be fixed before early next week, so there may be issues over the weekend and into Monday and Tuesday as well.
Thank you so much for joining us. That is Jordan Bond, who's right down there in the CBD in Auckland, near that high-rise building. Well, it shed a panel yesterday and it weighed about 40 kilos, and some more of them are coming loose, as he mentioned. It is almost 15 minutes past 5, and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. We're always keen to hear from you, so do flick us a text on anything you hear on the program, 2101. Tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Auckland Council is demanding action from a social housing provider after an elderly man lay dead in his flat for 5 days before being found. Brian McGinty was found last month after neighbours reported not seeing or hearing from him for nearly a week. That's despite living in pensioner flats, which are managed by a social housing provider. Now his neighbours and local councillors want answers over what went wrong. Nita Blake-Person reports.
Residents at Learbank Court Flats in Manurewa say they noticed Brian McGinty was struggling for months leading up to his death. This woman, who lives in the complex but doesn't want to be named, says he had falls and was disoriented.
I mean, he was a man that was a loner. He liked being by himself, but he was just so sick. It was awful to see him. That's why we were all so worried about him.
But it was when she didn't see or hear from him for 6 days that she became really worried.
I rang Ramaru Housing and said that we were worried because we hadn't seen or heard from any noise or anything or lights for 5 or 6 days. And eventually they sent an ambulance to do a welfare check. And when they went in, they found he was dead, and he'd been dead for 5 days.
The flats are operated by Haumaru Housing, which is 49% owned by Auckland Council and 51% by the Selwyn Foundation. Neighbours say they tried to raise the alarm about Mr McGinty with them multiple times.
We had asked 4 times for them to do something, and they just didn't get round to it. They didn't do anything. It wasn't until I rang the CEO of Haumaru Housing that they actually did something.
Haumaru Housing took over management of Auckland Pensioner Housing in 2016. Manurewa Local Board Chair Angela Dalton says that's not been all positive.
My expectation is that if we've got somebody, if there is somebody in the role of community, if there's a manager that's meant to be checking in on elderly people in our housing, they should be there most days. They should be, and they should be knocking on those doors, and this isn't what the residents are experiencing.
She says she's received a range of complaints about their services.
I have little confidence that they are providing the care and service that they should be to our residents. They may consider it not part of their contract, maybe it isn't part of their contract, but somebody must take responsibility. If we're in the social housing business, then we make sure we're looking after the people in those houses.
Auckland's Mayor Phil Goff has asked for a full investigation from the Board of Haumaru Housing to report back to the Council, and says if necessary an independent review will be carried out. Haumaru Housing Chief Executive Gabby Cleese wasn't available for an interview, but in a statement said the agency was deeply saddened by Mr McGinty's death. She said Haumaru Housing had been working with Mr McGinty so he could continue living independently at Learbank Court, and had spoken to him just days before his death. But his neighbours say that's not good enough, and they have a clear message.
It shouldn't have happened. That's all we want people to know. It just shouldn't have happened.
For Checkpoint, Nita Blake-Person.
To the US now, Southern California has been jolted by its most powerful earthquake in 25 years. The 6.4 magnitude quake touched off fires, damaged buildings, and forced the evacuation of a hospital in a desert town northeast of Los Angeles. But it seems there were only minor injuries. Conway Gittins reports.
You're not witnessing a holiday splash in a jacuzzi. The trembling water triggered by a powerful 6.4 magnitude earthquake that struck Southern California on Thursday. The epicenter, according to the U.S. Geological Survey, near the city of Ridgecrest. House fires and damaged buildings in the desert town some 100 miles northeast of Los Angeles, but authorities had no early reports of injuries. Ridgecrest Mayor Peggy Breeden said the city was dealing with fires and broken gas lines, as well as falling objects that hit people as the city endured many aftershocks. The great shaking was felt as far north as Fresno and as far east as Las Vegas, Nevada. Seismologist Dr. Lucy Jones warns Californians to brace for more.
We're seeing at least 2 faults involved. This area is characterized by robust sequences, so we expect to be seeing a lot of earthquakes today, and some of them could be damaging. Probably at least one more will be damaging.
The quake was just 5.4 miles deep. Its shallowness could exacerbate the amount of damage and destruction. This shaking was the strongest to rock Southern California since 1994, when a 6.6 magnitude tremor hit a heavily populated section of Los Angeles, resulting in billions of dollars in damage.
Conway Gittins reporting. Auckland's population is set to keep growing at a steady rate over the coming decades, and schools are among those who will feel the pressure. The government put aside just over $1 billion in the May budget for new school infrastructure, and today revealed how some of it will be spent. Much of it will go to Auckland and its sprawling outer suburbs, with a new school in Milldale and 228 classrooms will be added across 42 Auckland schools. The Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, and Chris Hipkins went to Hingaya Peninsula School, north of Auckland, to make the announcement. Our political editor, Jane Patterson, filed this report.
It's a popular waiata belted out by school kids around the country, whose numbers are expected to grow by 100,000 by 2030, 60,000 of those in the Auckland region.
So we need to make sure we have enough classrooms for everyone to learn in. Does that sound like a good idea? Yeah! Do you think you've got enough classrooms right now? Yeah! What do you think will happen though if we have more students come and join you?
The Education Minister, Chris Hipkins, says the biggest growth will be in Auckland, but there are other areas flagged by the Education Ministry.
We've got to make sure we're planning for all of the growth and not just in Auckland. So the growth plan has several kind of chapters to it, which get us on top of that across the whole country.
The Prime Minister asked the children what they thought would happen with the arrival of more students.
It will be crowded.
Studios will get too full. We don't want
so when we're on the mat, we'll get squished.
Oh, you don't want to be squished on the mat.
Jane Bush is the principal of Hingaya Peninsula School, where $5 million will be spent to create an extra 250 places. She says everyone is gearing up for population growth and the demands that come with it.
We know that there's a lot of people coming to live in New Zealand and in Auckland in particular, and having the space that's safe and secure and a modern learning environment for our students is really, really important.
The new school at Milldale will take up to 6 years to build. Gillian Bray is the principal of Wainui School, about 6 kilometres away. She says they and other schools are not yet under pressure, but she recognises the need to plan for the future.
Certainly in 2-3 years' time, there would be a need for a brand new school, but currently no one that I'm aware of is bursting at the seams. We're all fine. In fact, most of us have space. It would be nice if our own classrooms and our own building work got attended to really fast as well. Perhaps we could do that first and then build new schools.
National's education spokesperson Nikki Kay questions whether the government will come up with enough money to meet all future demand.
We'll be scrutinising it more, we'll be looking at what the geospatial mapping says. But what's very clear is the Minister of Education has already admitted that $1.2 billion between now and the next 10 years is only 50% of the funding that they need to deliver what they need for growth in New Zealand.
Part of the plan unveiled today was also about $20 million to create more than 500 extra student places across the Northland region. The government will announce its plans for schools in other regions in the coming weeks. From Parliament for Checkpoint, Jane Patterson.
The Crusaders are one win away from becoming just the second team in Super Rugby history to win 3 consecutive titles. The hosts are stacked with All Blacks and are highly favoured to win, but they are taking on a Juarez team who are pretty much an Argentinian international side, making the final a veritable test match. The Juarez should also have plenty of vocal and passionate support in the crowd, with tickets all but sold out. Most pundits are predicting a comfortable Crusaders win in Christchurch tomorrow night, but All Blacks coach Steve Hansen thinks the South Americans are capable of an upset.
And they really opened the Brumbies up the other day. Every opportunity they had off turnover ball, they punished them. So I think they're going down there believing 100% that they can beat the Crusaders. So that'll make them dangerous.
Crusaders assistant coach and former Island First Five, Ronan O'Gara, says they're not shying away from their goal of repeating the 3 titles won by the Crusaders between 1998 and 2000. He's one of many players and coaches leaving the club after the final, and he's desperate to go out with a three-peat.
This club is on the verge of achieving something spectacular. I think a few boys, me included, are dreaming about the big prize, but that's okay to dream, but you got to get back to task. We're 80 minutes away from achieving something we wanted to at the start of the season.
Christchurch local and Canterbury rugby expert Dan Bell is as partisan as any Crusaders fan, but he's wary of the Argentinian threat to his team's expected crown.
They're the Shadow Pumas side. They've got class all over the park. From Creevy, your leader at hooker, a wonderful player on the turnovers. Pablo Matera, who's one of the best ball-running loose forwards in the game. Lavanini at lock there. Then you've got the brilliant Buffelli at fullback, Thomas Cabelli at halfback, Orlando in the centres. You have an all-round side.
Well, RNZ rugby correspondent Joe Porter is in Christchurch at the Casa Publica Bar, where Argentinian Juarez fans are gathering, with more expected to arrive for tomorrow night's final. Hey Joe, I mean, how popular do you think this match is going to be? Is it sold out yet?
Look, it's almost sold out. As of last night, there are only a few hundred tickets left, Joe. You'd expect on match night it will become a sellout, which is a good thing because there's only 17,000 odd seats at the stadium, so it would be rather embarrassing for the Crusaders fans and Crusaders rugby to not have a sold out stadium. Plenty of those fans will be Argentinian. There's already a few hundred lurking around the city today. The Crown Plaza where the Juarez are staying is just up the road, and there's been plenty of Argentinians milling about today. As you said, the Casa Publica behind us are having a Latino themed night tomorrow night, so that's perfect and fitting for the occasion, and I've been told by some Argentinians already that if they win tomorrow night, they're going to take over the city.
Can they do it, do you think? The Juarez, can they take it?
Well, look, they are rank outsiders with the bookies. I think they're paying about $5 to the Crusaders, $1.15. They've come all the way from Buenos Aires, and the Crusaders haven't lost a game at home in 30 matches. So, look, they really are rank outsiders, and the odds are stacked against them. However, look, they come here with 11 wins from their past 12 games. They're probably the informed team of the playoffs. They have nothing to lose. They've already made history by making the Super Rugby final for the first time in their club's history of only 4 years. They now have a chance to cover themselves in glory with no external pressures. They are a dangerous team. They'll bring Latin emotion, Latin flair, Latin passion. Their supporters may well drown out the Crusaders. So it's going to be an interesting game, and I think a lot closer than many people expect.
Well, so no pressure then for the Crusaders, eh?
Yeah, just a bit. But look, the Crusaders do march towards these sorts of things. Coach Scott Robertson's one of those guys that tends to, rather than ignore it and treat it like another game, no, it is a final. We've got a chance to create history here and do something special. Let's embrace that challenge and know that we are capable of doing it. And I think that's probably the right approach to take.
OK, thank you, Joe. Let's hope the Crusaders go well tomorrow. That is Joe Porter, RNZ's rugby correspondent, deep in the heart of Christchurch there. Expected to be a great game tomorrow, and as he said, there's going to be Argentinian fans all over the place hoping to take it from us. Let's go to a quick bit of your feedback here. On an earlier story we ran about the elderly man in South Auckland who lay in his flat for 5 days, dead for 5 days before anyone noticed. Alan has got in contact and said, my neighbours and me have a close relationship. Keys exchanged, watch out. Why don't the neighbours take some responsibility? Charity begins at home. I'm 76. Alan says New Zealand has become full of poor me, poor thems, and expecting the government to fix it. Rather, dear me. Shall we do the headlines then? Coming up on Checkpoint on RNZ National, parents in the Wellington suburb of Whitby scramble to fight the closure of their local high school. The parents of children at Samuel Marsden Collegiate say they were given no heads up the school would close at the end of this year. And Donald Trump celebrates the greatest political journey in human history. And South Auckland teenagers take it upon themselves to help the homeless. Do get in contact about anything you've heard on the program this evening, 2101 on the text, or tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or there's the good old-fashioned email. We do love to get one of those, so email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. And Susanna is standing by with the headlines.
A lawyer who worked on the country's most expensive leaky building claim is dismayed the high-rise is still having problems 7 years after they were identified. A 40-kilogram panel fell from the 13th storey of the Victopia apartments in central Auckland yesterday, shutting the area off to traffic. More panels have now been found to be loose. The complex was subject to the country's largest leaky building claim, with repairs currently being carried out, believed to be about $40 million. 2 Chinese businessmen have been fined almost $3 million for illegally buying Auckland properties. The Overseas Investment Office began investigating Zhong Leung Hong and Shirley Kerr after they bought 2 rural properties in Warkworth. To buy large rural properties, overseas buyers have to apply for permission from the Overseas Investment Office and meet certain requirements. But an investigation launched by the authority in 2016 found the pair hadn't done that. An Auckland pensioner found dead in his flat may have been there for days. Brian McGinty, aged in his 70s, lived in Haumoru Housing's Leebank Court flats in Manurewa. A neighbour says they were told by the paramedics who found Mr McGinty's body in June that it was likely he'd been dead for 5 or 6 days. Haumoru Housing is 49% owned by the Auckland Council. The Mayor Phil Goff has asked for an investigation. The Auckland Council says a proposed development through ancient Pohutukawa on Auckland's North Shore has divided the community. The development involves a boardwalk through the sacred grove at the northern end of Takapuna Beach, with one option including the structure and the other excluding it. An Australian student released after being mysteriously detained in North Korea says he is now safe and well in Tokyo and intends returning to normal life. Alec Sigley flew to Tokyo last night to join his Japanese wife. He had been one of very few Westerners studying in the North Korean capital and went missing on June 25th. It's still not clear why he was detained. Those are the latest news headlines from RNZ National. Our next news and weather update is at 6.
Thanks, Susanna. This is Checkpoint and I'm Lisa Owen. Let's go to business news now with Giles Beckford. Happy Friday, Giles.
And to you too, Lisa.
Hey, I hear Fonterra has moved to calm nerves that it's struggling with the same kind of problems that have, well, sent Westland Dairy into foreign ownership.
Yes, there was a bit of a panic, I think, amongst some investors yesterday when they saw what was coming out of Westland and the talk about how, should we say, financially troubled, precarious it had been, and that had necessitated the sale to Yili, the Chinese company. A lot of people saying, well, they're a cooperative and Fonterra's a cooperative. They've got the same problems, surely. And a couple of funds that are associated or based on Fonterra earnings, but they are not Fonterra shares. They tumbled 5-6% on the share market yesterday. Clearly people thinking that Fonterra may actually be in a worse position than it had previously disclosed. Perhaps it may have to have a bit of a fire sale, possibly bits going to overseas buyers. Also a suggestion, I think, amongst some observers that perhaps with Yili, who own Oceana Milk in this country, perhaps getting a bit bigger and posing a bit of a bigger threat to Fonterra. All up, though, obviously the rattling milk churns necessitated some response from Fonterra. The Chief Financial Officer, Mark Rivers, came out today saying, look, our business is doing fine. We're not in the same predicament that Western Milk found itself in. We're going through a restructuring program. We've sold some assets, and we know we've already seen that with Tip Top. They've also sold a German food products company, and they've got their joint venture in Brazil with Nestle. That's up on the block, and I'm pretty sure that they'll sort out and find some buyers for some or all of their Chinese operations as well. The predicament for Fonterra is to pay down debt. Their target is $800 million in the current financial year. They're also looking to cut their capital expenditure and their operating expenses. In other words, getting back to basics, as they put it. They admit still, Mark Rivers admits still, that the company is underperforming. There's still a lot of work to be done to turn the business around. But he says they're making progress. Don't panic. breathe the grass and breathe calmly and clearly. There'll be an update in September when Fonterra brings out its annual result, and at that stage things will be clearer. But clearly they did need to just calm investor nerves, people starting to panic. And, I think one of the complaints about Fonterra is that perhaps it's not always as transparent and open as it could be. And on that basis, of course, in a vacuum, then people jump to conclusions, not necessarily the right ones.
Giles, let's go in a completely different direction. Riddle me this. Why does the US Navy send engines from their battleships here for repairs?
Oh, you want me to answer? I thought you had the answer. I thought it was one of those, I don't know why.
No, this one's on you, Giles.
This one's on me, as on a Friday it would be, wouldn't it? Well, people might not realise that Air New Zealand's just not about aeroplanes. It's actually about high-class, high-technical engineering. And in this case, it's gas engines. Now, it already has a jet engine facility, which it's had in Christchurch for quite a while. That's been always successful in being able to service various types of motors, Pratt & Whitney motors in particular for aeroplanes. But it's got an operation in Auckland which looks after gas turbines. Now, we won't get into the mechanics or the details of it, but gas turbines, by and large, are the powerhouses of warships, modern ships generally. And if you're running a fleet of battleships in Hawaii or out of Hawaii, and you think one of them sort of come to its 55,000 leagues limit, it needs a bit of a makeover, where do we send it? It turns out Air New Zealand's got a pretty well-performing and highly regarded gas turbine operation in Auckland. And they've been doing business with the US Navy for quite some time now. They've picked up their 4th contract. They're going to give 10 gas turbine engines a makeover, get them to a state where they can be put back into the battleships, and the 7th Fleet or whatever other fleet can sail the seas happily and safe and confident in the notion that they've had the best work done on their engines, which I suppose in the Middle East you might well need. But it's not chicken feed. It's worth about $25 million for the current contract, and over the life of their business relationship, Air New Zealand's done more than $120 million worth of business with the US Navy. So that may go some way to helping the airline counter the sort of fall off in the growth of bums on seats for their airlines. Let's get into the shipping business as well.
And Giles, shall we do the numbers?
Why don't we? Friday. It's the 4th consecutive record close for the top 50 index, up 57 points. That's about 0.5%, 10,615. There will be the sceptics amongst us who say, beware, a correction may be coming, at least a bit of a shake-up, so don't bank on it actually continuing to rise. On the currency market, the New Zealand dollar, 66.8 US cents, just over 93 Australian, and a smidgen over 53 British pence. And for another week, that's business.
Thanks, Giles. Giles Beckford, our business editor there. And in news just to hand, which does have a bit of a business theme as well, Justice Minister Andrew Little has welcomed Google's suspension of a system which published information subject to suppression order in the Grace Millane murder case. Andrew Little had referenced the search engine's former motto in a tweeted video venting his frustration at Google's breach of suppression orders in the case. The name of the man accused of the British backpackers' murder in Auckland last December remains suppressed pending an appeal. In a statement, Mr. Little says today Google reached out with an apology and acknowledgement that fair trial rights needed to be protected. He says Google has offered to immediately suspend the part of the system that led to suppressed information being breached. That just a hand from Justice Minister Andrew Little. And to the US, President Donald Trump has celebrated the greatest political journey in human history in a 4th of July commemoration before a soggy, cheering crowd of spectators on the grounds of the Lincoln Memorial. Flanked by tanks, Mr. Trump paid homage to the 5 branches of the military as a chorus sang service hymns as fighter jets, the helicopters and other military aircraft roared overhead. The president had been lambasted for attempting attempting to turn a national commemoration into a political rally, but in the end he stuck to the script, which focused more on history than politics. It was a made-for-TV spectacular, as the BBC's Chris Buckler reports.
With stirring music playing and the stars and stripes flying, a spectacular stage was set for what Donald Trump called a salute to America. Tanks and a podium were placed in front of the Lincoln Memorial, and from late morning, supporters of the president queued to get the best vantage point. There was only one thing that the White House couldn't plan for, and that was the weather. In the hours before the event, there was torrential rain and warnings of the possibility of thunderstorms. But many of Mr. Trump's supporters queued from lunchtime to make sure they got a good vantage point for the event.
I really wanted to come out and hear him and just, be around other people that really wanted to see him and hear him and think the same way and believe the same way that we do.
The president has long wanted the US to make a show of military might in its capital. However, in response to concerns, the White House insisted the president's speech would be patriotic, not political, although they knew that depended on him sticking to the script.
Today we come together as one nation with this very special salute to America. We celebrate our history, our people, and the heroes who proudly defend our flag, the brave men and women of the United States military.
It's likely the downpours in DC will have had an effect on the attendance figures. That won't have gone unnoticed by the president. Mr. Trump has in the past shown himself to be particularly sensitive about estimates of crowd size.
And that's Chris Buckler at the Lincoln Memorial in Washington. Direct talks between military rulers and protest leaders have resumed in Sudan. They had been on hold since troops loyal to the military council killed more than 100 peaceful protesters a month ago. A few days ago, huge protests took place across cities and towns in Sudan, despite the internet being shut down. The BBC's Anne Soy reports.
A teenage girl in front of me is sitting on the rear window of a car. Her torso is all out and she's banging on the roof to the tune of the rallying call. On the opposite street, I see families with children, groups of young people, protesters of all kinds, chanting and waving. The police and the dreaded paramilitary officers, RSF, are virtually everywhere, mostly on new pickup trucks mounted with rocket-propelled grenades and draped in Sudanese flags. Permission to cover these protests were conveniently delayed, but we managed to drive around Khartoum. The protest leaders were nowhere in sight. But later, I met one of them, Khalid Omar.
We have no media coverage. We have no even free access to the people. They cut the internet, they prohibited the direct meeting between us and the people. And with all those difficulties, still we have the trust of the people.
They relied on volunteers across Sudan to spread the word about the planned protests. I met one of the grassroots organizers at a secret location.
We started as small neighborhood unions and they slowly grew. In the beginning, it was really difficult because we were a technology generation. But we came up with ideas of using small pieces of paper, flyers, painting on walls, and talking to people everywhere. People in the streets were joining us. They were very positive about the movement and friendly too.
But were you concerned about your security? Were you afraid that you could be picked out by the intelligence and face the consequences for that?
We grew up in oppression. To us, it's not a new thing. After all, people have given their lives to this cause. What we are doing is nothing compared to what they gave.
What do you hope for?
I hope for a democratic country where I can think and do whatever I want freely.
Direct talks between their leaders and the ruling military council have resumed after stalling for weeks. The African Union and Ethiopia are hoping to broker a political deal. Mahmoud Derir is one of the mediators.
There's a great convergence of views between the parties on many points in the entire document. There's one point where opinions are conflicting, and that is the Sovereign Council.
Protest leaders also want justice for the victims of the June 3rd violent breakup of their sit-in. Dozens were killed during the dawn raid by security forces, and there have been allegations of rape. Khalid Omar of the Forces of Freedom and Change told me this before the latest round of talks began.
We have been satisfied with the last proposal because one of the things that had been mentioned, there should be an independent investigation through an African process. We agreed with that, and we think this satisfied because one of the major things for us is not to sacrifice the justice for any reason.
The hope now is that an agreement will be reached soon and the dreams of the protesters of having a civilian rule in Sudan finally realised.
That report from Anne Soy. The Bus Drivers Union warns operators in the Wellington region are putting drivers' health and safety at risk by putting the brakes on new rules on rest and meal breaks. An agreement was made between the bus companies, unions and government that they would be given a 12-month grace period to iron out the finer details around when breaks are applied. But the Tramways and Public Transport Union says the companies are not honouring their commitment to consult. Harry Locke has more.
Kevin O'Sullivan from the Tramway Union says Wellington drivers are going up to 5.5 hours without a break. That means no time to run to the toilet, no chance to stretch their legs, and worst of all, no coffee stop.
At the moment, they're either just being paid 10 minutes or put in between trips. But the law, as it's written, requires the breaks to be rostered to an area or a facility where people can go to the bathroom and have a cup of tea.
The changes to breaks and rest breaks under the Employment Relations Act came into force in May. However, bus companies were given a 12-month grace period after they complained that thousands of bus services would have had to be cancelled. But Mr O'Sullivan says operators are failing to keep their side of the bargain, to consult with the union and show more flexibility over breaks.
Regrettably, in Wellington, only one company, Mana Coach Services, is fully compliant with the legislation.
Charles McGuinness is the head of Wellington-based McGuinness Employment Law.
It does make things stricter in the sense that if there is no agreement between the employee or employees and employer, then there are mandatory set requirements for rest periods and meal breaks. And so the legislation is very prescriptive about when those breaks must be taken and how payment is to be made for those breaks.
There's no doubt it's going to be difficult for operators to comply with the new legislation, with the bus driver shortage already forcing some services to be cancelled. Drivers are having to work longer hours, says the Tramway Union's Kevin O'Sullivan, and he's worried about the dangers this could pose.
Hours at work is a big problem across the industry. There's people working 14-hour days driving a bus through the city, and, you know, in this day and age, it's pretty awful, to be honest.
He says there are health and safety problems with this.
Because of the shortage of bus drivers at the moment, a lot of the duties are long. 13, 14-hour days is common. And, you know, there's got to be a better way of operating.
Wellington Region's public transport network, Metlink, operates over 100 bus routes involving 4 different operators. No one from any of the bus companies was available to comment to RNZ today. Mr O'Sullivan has just lodged a complaint with the New Zealand Transport Agency, which is being considered now by the Labour Inspectorate. For Checkpoint, Harry Locke.
And we have just got a response from Wellington's largest bus company, Transurban. In a statement, Director Kevin Snellgrove says the company is complying with the law on rest and meal breaks, but the Memorandum of Understanding provides it with some flexibility. He says Mr O'Sullivan's comments around a driver working a 15-hour stretch is incorrect and illegal, and health and safety is the company's #1 priority. It is about 11 minutes away from 6. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National, and I'm Lisa Owen. Do let us know what you think about that. If you're a bus driver, we'd love to hear from you. You can text us on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or send us an email, checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. The pressure is on New Zealand's agricultural sector to come up with ways to meet climate change targets that will be legally binding by the end of the year. Under the Zero Carbon Bill, New Zealand will have to achieve net zero emissions by 2050. Agriculture has a less challenging target, but farmers will still have to make significant progress on reducing methane emissions, with the first target just 10 years away. It means they're having to not only look at farming practices, but also seek out technology that will help them meet those legal obligations, and fast. Our political reporter Charlie Drever has more.
Under the Zero Carbon Bill, biogenic methane from the likes of livestock will need to drop 10% below 2017 levels by 2030, and by 24 to 47% by 2050. National's climate change spokesperson Todd Muller hopes the 2050 target changes at the Select Committee stage.
We think the science doesn't demand a level of reduction of that amount, and so we would expect that to be looked at again. And I have every confidence that we will have a number of scientists who will participate in the submission process and give us a greater sense of where that number should be.
But Climate Change Minister James Shaw says the figures are in part derived from a report set up by the previous national government.
What they found was that with a medium to high degree of confidence that actually the agricultural sector would be able to reduce emissions by, I think they said, something like 24 to 48%. So it was almost an identical range by the year 2050 if the technology became available.
Government ministers promised money to help farmers reach those targets. The May budget provided $95 million over the next 4 years for research on climate change and new energy technologies. Federated Farmers Manawatu Rangateke Provincial President Richard Morrison says there's still a lot of uncertainty.
If it's likely that the farming community is asked to add a cooling effect, and there's only two ways to actually achieve that, and that's via offsets, which effectively does just reduce the amount of agriculture in New Zealand, which I don't think is actually taking responsibility for cooling in the globe. And the other way to do it is to find the technologies or innovations to be able to do it that we don't know of yet.
Richard Morrison says whatever path New Zealand takes, there needs to be reassurance for farmers it will be achievable.
The farming community and the rural community, they feel like they're not supported in terms of being given the option to carry on with their business and take responsibility for the issue, that the only way forward is to lose big chunks of farming for the country to meet its obligations. So that's where the big worry is.
To face upcoming challenges, farmers in the region have set up an initiative called the Rural Innovation Lab. Speaking with the Rural Innovation Lab's Vice Chairperson, James Stewart, on his dairy farm, he told me they're trying to take climate change by the horns.
We hear the words disruption, we're hearing the words agri-tech and innovation, they're quite buzzy words. And as a farmer, there is a lot of change coming our way, and a few of us farmers got together and thought, wouldn't it be nice to be sort of leading this from the ground level, from the farm gate, rather than being told this is how you're going to do it from now on.
The lab has been travelling and speaking to farmers to come up with potential projects. James Stewart says they've also been partnering with researchers and farmers to create a smart farm network to test new innovations.
Probably something that's been missing for a little while is that often we're given this thing and there's a lot of bugs in it, and then suddenly farmers you're starting to get non-compliance happening and a little bit of frustration at the farm level. We want to try some of these things out before they go out to the farmers and actually say yes or no, and here we can help you with some of these bugs and blips in the system.
James Stewart says the Innovation Lab has been funded by the Provincial Growth Fund until the end of the year. However, he says they're looking at now extending that timeframe and eventually rolling the initiative out to the rest of the country. The Zero Carbon Bill is now before the Select Committee, with the deadline for public submissions closing in about a fortnight. For Checkpoint, ko Charlie Drever tēnei.
And you can hear more about this and the Zero Carbon Bill on Focus on Politics between 6:30 p.m. and 7, and tomorrow after the 5 o'clock news. South Auckland teenagers who say homelessness is a big problem in the area have taken it upon themselves to do something about it. Students from Manurewa High School fundraised money to buy ingredients to make hot meals for the homeless, and today they were busy in the kitchen. Our reporter Jessie Chang went out to take a look and to test the kai.
The smell of something delicious wafts through the air at Manurewa High School. There's pasta salad being mixed together and chop suey and corned beef cooking away on the stovetop. And expertly putting the dishes together are the students.
Yeah, we just observe our mothers as they cook. You know, so it's basically like a childhood kind of food.
Looks like you've picked up a few tricks though, like you know what you're doing.
Yeah.
Yeah, we do. We help out at home sometimes.
It's a special day that's been months in the making. It all started with the school project that asked the students how they could make the community a happier place. To do that, they looked at what made people unhappy, homelessness and poverty being the biggest causes. 15-year-old Rhiannon Taylor says there are a lot of people doing it rough in the area.
It makes me feel like sad, and I want to help them all the time. Like if I have any spare change, you know, they ask for some money, I will try my best to give it, you know.
The students decided to do something about it, and the idea of feeding the homeless was born. One of the deputy principals, Barbara Nawati Sala-Ivao, says they fundraise money themselves in order to pay for the ingredients. She couldn't be prouder of the teenagers.
Like there are bumps in the ride, you know, lots of things that didn't go our way, trying to find the most ethical approach to be able to even get to meet people that are homeless. Like that was a journey in itself. But yeah, today the kids have turned up. They're using prior knowledge that they already have. Like I got shoot away, don't tell me how to make the potato salad, I already know. The chop suey was like, we already know how to make chop suey. So I was like, sweet, I've got no jobs today, you guys are doing all the work.
And everything has to pass the all-important taste test. Brooklyn Nathan and Tayao Pumaletime asked me to check their corned beef.
Rate from 1 to 10, please.
Not bad.
What do you think it needs?
I think it's good. It's definitely got enough seasoning in there.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'll give it a solid 8.
Oh, yeah. Thank you.
Solid 8. Although I'm not a chef. So.
Once all the kai is done, it's packed into the car and everyone heads off to the Friendship House in Manukau. The free meal is given for anyone who comes in, no questions asked, and it doesn't take long for people to start digging in.
Just came in for a sandwich, but this is really much better. And I think that's great. It's gives them an understanding of the real world out there, doesn't it? You see some people do find it hard, and just a little bit of love out there is all good.
For the students, there are smiles all around. They say it feels good doing their bit for their community. E tāmaki makaurau o te hōtaka o te ahi nei, ko Jessie Chang tēnei.
And you can check out Jessie's story online and have a look at that amazing kai if you've been listening. It's well worth it. After 67 years, the American comic magazine Mad is to cease regular publication. It won't disappear completely, but will largely be limited to repackaging old material. A combination of silliness and satire, Mad made the image of the gap-toothed schoolboy Alfred E. Newman famous, even outside of America. Here's the BBC's Vincent Dowd.
Agnes, oh Agnes, oh. EC Comics launched Mad in 1952 alongside its horror and sci-fi titles. The point of Mad was to be funny. Soon it had a sideline in satirical records. 'Cause today I was informed by the FBI. You're nothing but a teenage Russian spy. The heyday was in the mid-70s when each edition sold some 2 million copies. Over the decades, Alfred E. Newman, the usual Mad cover boy, barely changed. Short red hair gappy grin, sticky out ears and a suggestion of amiable stupidity. It was definitely not a compliment when, in May, President Trump, referring to Democratic politician Pete Buttigieg, said Alfred E. Newman cannot become US president. Significantly, Buttigieg, who's 37, said he'd had to look up the reference. Mad's readership has been ageing and diminishing. From 2010, a TV series based on the magazine gave a new lease of life for a time.
The Avengers have put a stop to your dastardly deeds, Red Skull.
Why Red Skull always choose evil?
I don't know. I have a skull, it's red, my options are limited.
The current publishers say new material will now be limited to end-of-year specials. The magazine, they say, will feature classic, best of and nostalgic content from the last 67 years.
And just a bit of time for it's a police appeal for information, actually. Police are seeking information from the public who witnessed a man's erratic driving in Invercargill today. At around midday, the police say they were alerted to a man who was wanted for arrest. This person's driving a gold Ford Falcon registration BWR 478, and that car was going erratically through the city. Police say the man was driving the same vehicle on Lauder Crescent sometime later and attempted to evade arrest. Now, during this attempt, he apparently drove his vehicle into a police car, causing damage to that vehicle. They'd like to hear from you if you know the whereabouts.
RNZ News at 6. Ngā mihi nui ko Susana Leātawa tēnei. The Justice Minister, Andrew Little, has welcomed a back down by Google after suppressed details of a high-profile murder case were sent to New Zealand subscribers. Earlier this week, Mr Little criticised the search engine for failing to take action over automatically generated search highlights, which breached suppression orders in the Grace Millane case. The name of the man accused of the British backpacker's murder in Auckland last December remains suppressed pending an appeal. Google has today sent a written apology to Mr Little, offering to immediately suspend the system. Mr Little says he looks forward to constructive engagement with Google and other multinational tech corporations on long-term solutions for upholding suppression orders in the digital age. An entire city block in Auckland has been shut to traffic for at least the weekend after a heavy concrete panel fell from an apartment building. The council and owners of Victopia Apartments have known about problems with the building since 2012. Matthew Tunison reports.
A concrete panel weighing an estimated 40 kilograms came crashing down from the 13th floor yesterday, and engineers have found that more panels are coming loose. Traffic has been backed up on Nelson Street and either side of the cordons on Victoria Street West for much of the day, while engineers inspected the building. Victopia was subject to the country's most expensive leaky building claim of $40 million after cracks and leaks appeared in 2012. Lawyer Tim Rainey, who worked on the case, is dismayed the building is still having problems. This is Matthew Tunison.
2 Chinese businessmen have been fined almost $3 million for illegally buying properties in Auckland. The Overseas Investment Office began investigating Zhong Leung Hong and Shirley Kerr after they bought 2 rural properties in Warkworth. To buy large rural properties, overseas buyers have to apply for permission from the Overseas Investment Office and meet certain requirements. But an investigation launched by the authority in 2016 found the pair hadn't done that when they bought the properties in 2012 and 2014. The High Court has now ordered them to sell up and pay penalties, costs and the gain made on the investment, totalling $2.95 million. The Prime Minister says funding to build new classrooms will be a relief for schools and students, but also the construction industry. A new primary school will be built in Milldale near Auckland, and 228 classrooms will be added across 42 Auckland schools. That will be paid for from the $1.2 billion set aside for school property in this year's budget. Jacinda Ardern says the National Growth Plan being rolled out by the government flags well ahead where building work will be needed, which will give assurances to the construction industry.
Hoping that ultimately this will be both a relief for teachers, principals, parents, but also the construction industry. What we're providing here is a pipeline of work. We're flagging well ahead.
The Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern. A Christchurch construction worker says the mental health of workers should be an important part of health and safety on the job. Christchurch construction firm Switched On Group today held its first seminar for workers on mental health. The campaign was launched today by Switched On Chief Executive Chris Hughes, who was on a mission to raise awareness after the sudden death of his brother by suspected suicide. More than 500 staff and contractors came to hear mental health advocate Mike King. Switched On employee Paul Lynch says a culture shift is needed.
For so long we've been smashed with the physical health and safety with legislation and rules and regulations that dictate what we can and can't do, the way we have to behave, what we should wear and all those sorts of things, when the mental health aspect of it is equally as important, possibly more important.
Paul Lynch says it's great to see a company doing something off its own back and at its own expense. The Auckland Council says a proposed development through ancient Pohutukawa on Auckland's North Shore has polarised the community. The development involves a boardwalk through the sacred grove at the northern end of Takapuna Beach, with one option to include it and the other to exclude it. Marnie Dunlop reports.
The wāhi tapu of 19 ancient Pohutukawa was where Māori would prepare bodies for burial and is of great significance to mana whenua. The council says it has consulted with 7 iwi who want the option to block off the grove to the public, but its manager of Sports, Parks, Design and Programme, Chris Bird, says a large section of the community want to see access maintained. He says it's become a polarising topic. Chris Bird says feedback for the proposals close next Friday. Ko Māni Dunlop tēnei.
It's coming up to 6:05. The Pakistan captain, Sarfraz Ahmed, says his side will be going all out to score 500-plus runs tonight in their near-impossible task to qualify for the Cricket World Cup semi-finals. Pakistan are 5th on the table, behind New Zealand, who currently hold the 4th and final semi-final berth. Pakistan need to bat first against Bangladesh and win by at least 316 runs to leapfrog the Black Caps on net run rate to reach the final 4. The match at Lord's starts at 9:30. Rafael Nadal has condemned Nick Kyrgios's dangerous antics after their gripping tennis grudge match at Wimbledon. The 18-time Grand Slam champion claimed a 4-set win over the polarising Australian. Kyrgios is refusing to apologise for slapping a series of scorching forehands straight at Nadal's body. Nadal says he's professional enough to deal with Kyrgios's body shots, but felt slapping balls with such ferocity was also reckless.
The history of this sport is about respect and it's about playing fair, and I don't say Nick does this stuff to bother the opponent, but it's true that when he hit the ball like this, it's dangerous. It's not dangerous for me, it's dangerous for a line referee, it's dangerous for a crowd, because when you hit the ball like this, you don't know where the ball goes.
Rafael Nadal. The New Zealand driver Scott McLaughlin has put an end to speculation over his future. Despite rumours the reigning supercars champion is contemplating a move to race in the US, he has recommitted to DJR team at Penske for the 2020 season. That's the news.
Volunteering is at breaking point.
Volunteering is hugely relied upon, massively undervalued and at real risk of actually just falling away.
Coastguard radio, Coastguard radio, Coastguard Essential radio. Services are on the verge of sinking.
We're still recruiting volunteers, but unfortunately we're losing them faster than we're recruiting them.
This week on Insight, Teresa Cowie investigates the crisis facing volunteering, just after the 8 o'clock news on Sunday morning with Jim Mora on RNZ National.
Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow. For Northland, fine spells, a few showers clearing tomorrow afternoon. Auckland through to Waitomo, including Coromandel, Bay of Plenty, Taupo and Taumaranui. Cloudy periods and a few showers today, mainly fine tomorrow. Taranaki and Taihapu to Wellington, partly cloudy. A few showers clearing later tomorrow. Snow possible on the Desert Road overnight tonight. Gisborne, Hawke's Bay and Wairarapa, mostly cloudy with scattered showers. Nelson, Buller, Westland, Fiordland, also northern Marlborough. Mainly fine, but isolated showers about southern Fiordland. For the remainder of Marlborough, also Canterbury, mostly cloudy with showers north of Ashburton, gradually clearing tomorrow, mainly fine elsewhere. For Otago and Southland, partly cloudy with a few light showers, mainly about the south coast. Fine spells increasing tomorrow. Chatham Islands, showers. You're with RNZ National. It is coming up to 8 minutes past 6.
Thanks, Susanna. If you're just joining us, this is Checkpoint and I'm Lisa Owen. Parents in a Wellington suburb are scrambling to fight the closure of a local high school. Parents of the 170 students at Samuel Marsden Collegiate in Whitby, a co-ed private school, were sent an email earlier this week announcing it will be closed at the end of the year. A copy of the email given to Checkpoint explained to parents the school was no longer financially viable. But as Logan Church reports, parents say this came as a complete shock as there was no prior consultation.
The decision to shut the school came as a complete shock to the parents of the 170 students in Year 7 to 13 at Samuel Marsden Collegiate. Among them was Tim Green, who has two daughters in the school, one in Year 7 and one in Year 12.
Just as we were all returning home Monday evening, we got an email in our inboxes, parents that is, from the Samuel Marsden Trust Board announcing that the school was going to close at the end of the year and that it was very much a final decision. It wasn't the opening to a consultation process. And so you can imagine that everybody was first kind of wondering whether that was a joke, then quickly realised it wasn't, and that turned to a full range of emotions, anger, shock, worry, anxiety, stress. Everybody was just very careful, very upset and distraught at the news.
The school was established 15 years ago on the site of the old Whitby golf course. It falls under the governance of Samuel Marsden Korori, an all-girls school. Since then it's slowly grown, and that's why the sudden closure came as a surprise.
Speaking for my kids, there aren't a huge number of options available to us around the immediate area. A lot of the neighbouring schools or schools in the vicinity have actually got full roles already and big waiting lists, so it's not like it's as easy as transferring just down the road.
Tim Green says meetings were held this week with school management and boards, and following that an announcement came that the parents would get first rights to buy the school from them. A committee of concerned parents was thrown together last night at an open meeting to discuss the situation and what parents can do. That committee, which Tim is on, met properly for the first time today and are now trying to weigh up options.
I think there's a really clear sense of commitment from all of the school community that they want us to take matters into our own hands. They want to see us set up the school as its own entity so that we can actually, take control of our future. There's a really strong kind of commitment to doing that. We need to understand and work with our supporters to see whether that's as an integrated school, part private, part state school, whether it's a entirely private school that are set up and funded by shareholders yet to be determined.
The email to parents announcing the closure came from Principal Narelle Umbers. Fees are around $16,000 a year. I asked Ms Umbers why the school is no longer financially viable.
The school has currently 170 students. To be financially sustainable, we would need a roll of well over 220, so it's a matter of building additional classrooms and things. The point is it isn't sustainable for the Trust Board to continue to run it.
Narelle Umbers says the board looked at various options before announcing the closure, including selling the school, and she admitted parents weren't consulted.
The board took the decision that asking the community or going to the community earlier would have been misleading.
What do you mean by that? I don't understand what you mean by misleading.
It would have given the impression that the board had other available options to pursue.
But the school could have told the parents that there was a financial problem, couldn't it?
Back in 2016, the school did do that, and the result was instability and distress at that point in time. So the decision was taken this time that to repeat that process would not have been helpful.
Ms Umbers says she has been in discussion with principals of other schools in the Wellington region about taking some of the Whitby students on.
It's a sad and difficult time. I really feel for everyone involved. I mean, as an educator, this is the last sort of thing that you want to see happen. And I believe that everyone on the board feels that way as well. It's a really sad and difficult time for our community, and I feel deeply for them.
But the message from parents is clear. Hold on, the battle for their school is not over yet. For Checkpoint, Logan Church.
California is no stranger to earthquakes, but the largest shake in 2 decades rattled Southern California this morning, hitting communities from Las Vegas to Long Beach and ending a relatively quiet period in the state's seismic history. The 6.4 tremor was centred around 250 kilometres northeast of Los Angeles in the remote Searles Valley, but it was felt as far away as Mexicali in Mexico and Phoenix, Arizona. CNN's Paul Verkaman reports.
A startling morning this 4th of July for residents in California.
We were actually asleep in our bed, and then we woke up to seeing things flying off the wall.
A 6.4 magnitude earthquake, the strongest quake to hit the region in almost 20 years, was felt as far away as Los Angeles, 175 miles away from the epicenter.
Everyone's been really shaken up. No one wants to go inside. Everyone's been outside, out in the open in the parking lot. There's nothing really to just fall and crush you or anything like that.
More than 100 aftershocks have been reported, and seismologists warn they will continue for several weeks. A state of emergency has been declared in the city of Ridgecrest. One local resident says his house seemed safe minutes after the quake, but then
I heard something crackling a little bit and went to that door and opened it, and it was all fire.
A suspected gas rupture set fire inside the garage. Gas leaks and water leaks are now the top concern as authorities set up response teams and search and rescue crews ready for any damage that may come.
We expect we will be able to move on from this and not see too many awful things happen.
But it is a good reminder to tell people to get a plan, to be ready for an earthquake, because in California we can have one at any time.
California Democrat Congresswoman Nanette Barragan ending that report. It's almost 15 minutes past 6. You're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. The head of a trades company is leading the way in tackling high suicide rates in the construction industry by encouraging his employers to discuss their mental well-being. Switched On Group Chief Executive Chris Hughes has a very personal connection to the issue and is on a mission to raise awareness and see more tradies and builders open up about their struggles. Alicia Foon was at the launch of their campaign seminar.
At 7 o'clock on a cold Christchurch morning, over 500 tradies in high-vis vests gathered in Christchurch for a health and safety talk with a difference. It's the first of a series of events being put on by construction company Switched On, who are asking their employees to have open conversations around mental health. After losing his brother to suicide last year, the company's CEO Chris Hughes says he has a responsibility to be part of changing the culture.
Well, we sort of noticed a couple of years ago that there was more mental health issues in the workplace, so we started off with that. And then obviously New Year's Eve this year, my brother passed away from suicide. So we've ramped it up a little bit since then and sort of got a bit more involved.
Switched On employee Paul Lynch says it's great to see a company doing something off its own back and its own expense to try and keep their people safe.
For so long we've been smashed with the physical health and safety with legislation and rules and regulations that dictate what we can and can't do, the way we have to behave, what we should wear and all those sorts of things, when the mental health aspect of it is equally as important, possibly more important, but it's the one thing that is the most ignored and it's always overlooked, and there's no rules, no legislation that says that companies have to do anything.
A report from SiteSafe last month showed that between 2007 and 2017, 339 people in the construction sector took their own lives. Mr. Lynch says the male-dominated industry leads to jobs that are attached to high stress and high-risk situations.
There's a lot of pressure on tradies to meet timelines, deadlines and get things done to a very high quality. So quite often something has to give, and it can be a person's own mental health, because they may start to looking to substances to help them to maintain those levels of performance.
It's this type of pressure that mental health advocate Mike King addressed during the 3-hour seminar. Mr. King spoke candidly about his inner critic, which he says is the biggest problem in mental health today. Tradies were encouraged to raise their hands if they were struggling and then look around to realise they weren't alone. More than half raised their hands. RNZ spoke to some of the workers afterwards.
Are you someone that personally talks about what you're going through and
no, not at all.
On mental health?
You know that bloke that says nothing? Yeah, that's me.
It's just easier that way, anyway, but it's given you a lot to think about, to be fair. It's quite moving.
I'd like to see people maybe taking a more positive approach and actually being active in asking people if they're okay.
I went for a bit of depression and things like that, and I don't know, I guess just opening up, talking to people a lot more, which I found hard.
We're probably a group of grumpy old builders that don't talk about our feelings, so maybe that'll change.
This seminar is a small step forward, giving those working for the trade sector an invitation to be vulnerable. Mō te hōtaka o te ahi ko Elisha Foon tēnei.
Crusaders rugby supporters are bullish about winning a third Super Rugby title in a row, but not everyone in the Garden City wants the hosts to emerge victorious. The defending champions are taking on Argentina's Jaguares in an all but sold out match in Christchurch tomorrow night. Our reporter Nicholas Poynton spoke to people on the chilly streets of the city today and found a plethora of self-assured fans, a sprinkling of doubters, and some out-of-towners who would like nothing more of them for the Crusaders to lose.
I'll be supporting the Crusaders. Who else?
No, they're going to get killed. Yeah. Crusaders will take them out without a problem. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
They've got a chance, but I'm 99% confident on our boys.
It'll be closer than what people may imagine. I think it could only be between 3 and maybe 10 points in it.
There's a quiet sense of confidence brewing on the streets of Christchurch today as Crusaders fans expect their team to walk away with their third straight championship. Though there are people like Blues superfan Mikey Palmer who couldn't think of anything sweeter than a Crusaders defeat at the hands of the Argentinian Jaguares.
Nah, man, I'm not a Crusaders fan at all. I'd rather support any other team in the world, like South Africa, any South African team, Australian team, or even the Jaguares over the Crusaders, man. Yeah, it's like, I just can't stand them.
Fans are not the only ones who have a lot riding on tomorrow's game. Hospitality operators in the central city are hoping jubilant fans will spill into their bars and restaurants after the game to celebrate. Mel Ling, who co-owns the Little Fiddler pub on the terrace, says the Crusaders' current championship run has brought people together, and she is apprehensively looking forward to Saturday night.
We are all Crusaders at heart. So that's the one thing that's been phenomenal. I'm slightly looking forward to this weekend. We're going to be rushed off our feet, and everyone seems to be in good spirits when we are. There's no grief between fans when they're out at the moment, so that's great.
Peter Morrison from Hospitality New Zealand says the final is definitely bringing a much-needed influx of people to the city.
I know there's 200 flying in on a charter plane from Argentina, which is excellent for the city, but we need more of this sort of thing, and I know Christchurch NZ are working on getting more events happening, so it's all looking positive, but it's going to be a pretty tough winter.
Juan Cruz Rodolfi is among those Argentinians living and working in Christchurch. He has been following the Super Rugby closely this season and cannot believe his home team is playing in the final in Christchurch.
It's just crazy. It's like even I was following the Crusaders against Hurricanes. I really want the Hurricanes to win because it will make it different because I've been following the Super Rugby as well. But at the same time, I wanted Crusaders to win because that would mean that we would play here in Christchurch. And for me, it was just a huge coincidence that they go to the finals, they get to play over here as well, so I can go and watch them. So, yeah, that's just so good.
News that many Argentinian fans will be at the game on Saturday comes as no surprise to Jaguares utility forward Juan Leguizamon.
We are everywhere. There's a lot of Argentinians in New Zealand. Yeah. So it's good to have Argentinian people supporting us far away from our country. So it's great to have them, and we will try to give them a good day too.
And the Jaguares will hope they deliver when the final kicks off at 7:35 tomorrow night. For Checkpoint, this is Nicholas Poynton.
A Taranaki photographer says her dream to refurbish an old hotel in Normanby has been ruined because of the constant noise of heavy vehicles rolling past her front door. Victoria Jin says the hotel is situated on what should be a quiet back street, but about 140 trucks go past every day, and she's demanding changes. Our Taranaki Whanganui reporter Robin Martin went along to see what all the fuss is about.
Victoria Ginn left her bolt hole in Fiji after falling in love with the two-storey commercial hotel in Normanby. She bought it about a year ago with the idea of turning it into a gallery and a bed and breakfast. The former Wellingtonian thought the hotel, which was built in 1911, had potential, although she admits it was a bit of a rescue job.
It was neglected, rain falling through the roofs and everything was in a state of rot and decay, so I've got rather a large project on my hands to reinvigorate it and give it some life again. It was the heart of the local community. Like a lot of these small towns now, the hotels have fallen into disuse and there is no community centre for people.
Although the hotel is set well back from State Highway 3, Ms Ginn has discovered it sits at the junction of two roads used by heavy transport to crisscross South Taranaki.
We're having 24 hours a day heavy traffic passage, which is extraordinarily disturbing to anyone who's sensitive or anyone who's at all wanting peace of quiet and peace of mind and a gentle lifestyle. You just don't have it, and it's the same throughout a lot of the small towns in New Zealand.
Ms Ginn says each time a truck goes past, it's like going through a small but very loud earthquake. And she's not the only person who's noticed the traffic. A staff member at the Normanby Butcher, Karen Manson, says a new road layout about 2.5 years ago has made things worse.
Yeah, it's pretty busy. It's got busier since they closed the Kartini Road off, because they used to go that way. They've closed that off and then it went to the Austin Road, which went onto the main road. So that used to be the truck route, eh?
Miss Manson reckons more trucks now come down Mawhitiwhiti Road and turn onto Kete Marae Road to access the state highway right outside the old commercial hotel. Karen Hay shifted to Kete Marae Road 2 months ago and she's already fed up.
We have a lot of grandchildren, and the grandchildren we have to constantly monitor because we have them every weekend. The other thing is the bricks falling off the house every time it shakes, and just the constant shaking of the house. You know, and nobody adheres to the 50k speed zone. They come down here and they just speed.
But Cody Langton at the Normanby hairstylist reckons that's just the way it is.
I haven't really noticed any difference because it's always been busy since that road connects to Manaia and all the way, you know, it goes out to that way, to wherever it leads to.
Kete Marae Road resident Don Bright wasn't too concerned either.
No, not really. I've been here ages. There's always trucks going up and down here. Hasn't worried me.
Victoria again has complained to the South Taranaki District Council but isn't getting much traction on the heavy vehicle front. Senior roading engineer Carolyn Copeland says they have looked into her problems.
We've had technical equipment out there on the roads, found the vibrations are well within national standards, and found that there hasn't really been any increase in the traffic. She is located on a heavy traffic route, so trucks going past all times of the day and night should be expected.
Ms Copeland concedes, however, that overall traffic volumes are increasing and that speeding on Kete Marae and Mawhitiwhiti roads is a problem.
We have talked to the local police about the speeding issues that have been reported by the residents, and you know, we can consider a speed reduction in the future. We will be looking into this as part of a district-wide review. We're probably about 12 months away from starting that project. It is quite a big scope of work for us.
That's not good enough for Miss Ginn, who sees herself as standing up for those too afraid to speak out.
People who have been suffering for long periods of time through the passage of heavy vehicles rattling through their small towns, destroying their communities, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 12 months of a year. You need to do something about it, please, the New Zealand government. Stop the transit of heavy vehicles through small towns.
Ms Ginn says if she's unsuccessful with the District Council, she intends taking the issue up with the Minister of Transport. I Taranaki mo te hōtaka o te ahi pou nei, ko Robin Martin aho.
And keeping with the transport theme, driving in the carpool lane without passengers would rate right up there on the list of things that annoy commuters in our cities. But it's an international problem with many and varied excuses trotted out by drivers who think they're a cut above their fellow commuters. In the US, they call them HOV lanes for high occupancy vehicles. Now, that's a vehicle with more than one occupant. And when the Nevada Highway Patrol pulled a man over on the interstate earlier this week, there were some raised eyebrows over the excuse being offered. CNN's Denise Roach takes up the story.
Henry, 5329, we're going to be in the left shoulder.
Nevada Highway Patrol Trooper Travis Smacka had no idea what he was walking up on.
You got your registration and insurance as well?
The blue Chrysler on I-15 had no special markings or indicators of what it was, but the driver, quick to explain.
Deceased in the back?
A mortuary van transporting a dead body and driving in the HOV lane.
I thought it was just someone's privately owned minivan.
The traffic stop, like no other.
I look in the back and I notice the inside of the vehicle is equipped a lot like a hearse, where it's got the kind of some bars system and it's got a gurney and there's a body bag laying on the gurney strapped in.
Smack says he and his partner were doing targeted enforcement of the HOV lanes after receiving complaints from motorists that too many people are breaking the rules. A check of the Nevada Department of Transportation's website shows who can and cannot use the lanes. And while riding with a deceased passenger is not spelled out, Smack says this is not a proper use.
I'll go ahead and give you a warning today, but I'm going to warn you, we're working the HOV lanes pretty heavy today, okay? He won't count. He's not with us anymore. But
Smack says he's now shocked by how much attention the traffic stop is generating.
It threw me for a little bit of a loop.
Hundreds of people reposting and commenting on a single tweet on the department's Twitter page. But while mannequins have been used to try to skirt the law in other cities, this could be a first.
It was definitely one of those excuses for a violation I'll never forget. It's probably the most creative one I've had in my career.
Bit of a weird one, that. Nevada Highway Patrolman Travis Smacka ending that report from CNN's Denise Roach. That's about all we've got time for this evening. Thank you so much for joining us, whether you listened on radio or watched us on TV. Remember, you can go online to check out our visual stories as well if you want to catch up on some of them. Back next week.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. The Justice Minister Andrew Little has welcomed a backdown by Google after suppressed details of a high-profile murder case were sent to New Zealand subscribers last year. Crews are working to secure the facade of an apartment building near Auckland's Sky Tower that has stopped traffic through an entire block. The Prime Minister says funding to build new classrooms will be a relief for schools and students, but also the construction industry. And an Australian student released after being mysteriously detained in North Korea says he intends returning to normal life. Those are the headlines. Our next news will be at 7.
Take the pulse of the day's news every weeknight at 10.
And sadly, I think most farmers wanted to keep it, but there are crunch times when the debt gets too high.
Lately with me, Karen Hay, is your late night eye on the latest headlines and the people who are making them.
Come and talk to us as victims and come and talk to us about our experiences of being in court. Come and talk to us about what happened.